The scene was horrific. A family of three left strewn along the side of a rural byway in southern France in 1952. The police quickly settled on an aging farmer as the mass killer, and he readily agreed, confessing almost as a boast. Only no one believed him, including two consecutive French presidents, and the real story behind what came to be known as the Domenici affair remains mysterious to this day.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Weird World podcast. I'm Carrie.
I'm Dean.
Hi, Dean.
Hi. How you doing?
This is going to be
a good old-fashioned murder mystery trigger warning, I suppose, which may be a little too late given the tease, but there is violence against children in this episode as well.
So if you need to skip it, skip it.
Okay. But it's one of those kind of semi-forgotten, but at the time a very notorious, internationally known murder mystery that took place in France in 1952.
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, but it was big. And at the very end, you'll maybe throughout, you'll kind of see parallels to something that was more recent and also very, very notorious, which I'll mention at the very end. So let's start with the beginning of the story. It starts with really kind of a vacation, maybe a working vacation, quote unquote. You'll see what I mean by that in a while. But just like any other middle or upper middle class family from England in the early 1950s, the Drummond family would look forward to taking vacations on the continent again. You know, it was just World War II ended in 1945, lots of dislocation, but just, things are starting to get back to normal a little bit. So the people were taking the normal vacations they had done. In England, always, vacations commonly, they go to France, right? Mm-hmm. And so even at the time, there's still some food rationing in the UK. People forget that. Food rationing in the UK was a thing up until the early to mid 1950s. But the world's getting back to normal, all this dislocation. So the Drummond family said, hey, in the summer of 1952, let us take a vacation. Let's go to France. We'll go on a camping vacation. We'll bring our camping gear with us. We'll bring our car on a ferry. We'll drive through France. There's someone we can stay with there for a portion. But we'll do this kind of little camping vacation through France before we come back home.
You know who else did that?
Who did that?
Ina Garten and her husband when they were newlyweds.
Did they?
Yeah. They figured out how they could travel I think they primarily in France on $5 a day.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was the reason. They're fairly well off, this family, but
I guess that whole camping thing, families camping in France in the summertime is a big thing.
Yeah.
Well, or at least it was back then.
And you'll see where they chose to camp, but there's never an indication that it was odd. Even though to me, in the modern times, where it seems a little odd that it was basically, so it's Jack Drummond. He was a 61-year-old man, and his wife, whose name is Anne. I never quite find her age, but she was younger than he was. I don't think dramatically younger, but younger than he was. And they had a 10-year-old daughter named Elizabeth.
Like I'm younger than you.
Pardon? Like
I'm younger than you. The wife is almost always younger than the husband.
Okay, Carrie. So the Drummonds were like, I described them as this normal family, going to take a normal thing that English families were doing at the time, but they weren't really completely normal because Jack Drummond was a pretty well-known person, or at least was a pretty prominent person. He was in the present here in 1952. He was a senior researcher at Boots, which was a Nottingham-based pharmaceutical firm. Still around. You've heard of Boots? Mm-hmm. Okay. Didn't know that you'd heard about. I had not heard of Boots. Have you heard of Boots?
Well, I heard of Boots being in England, and now there are Boots products here.
Okay.
I've heard at Target.
Really?
I don't know if Target still sells Boots.
For someone who's boycotting Target, you sort of find your way to Target quite often.
That's why I'm saying I don't know if they still sell it because now they have Ultas inside of Targets. So
here at this time they were doing a lot of chemicals, a lot of agrochemicals, agricultural chemicals, things like that in the 1950s, sure, and probably because they were going to switch a lot of things during the war. Family, the Drummonds lived in Nottingham, where his job was based. He had been, though, a London University biochemistry professor before the war, and during the war, he had become a mostly unsung hero, but very much someone who was instrumental in the war effort. Drummond's expertise was in nutrition.
Oh.
And when the war started, and you had all the U-boat depredations were sinking a lot of British shipping. Global trade was disturbed. Of course, Britain relied a lot on global trade. So there was a real worry that they would not be able to feed themselves adequately. Yeah. The population on the British Isles and the hungry soldiers on England and early on still in France. So Drummond was enlisted by the government to help him just kind of figure out, what do we need? We need to have a healthy diet. How do we do that? Let's be smart. Let's be innovative. So, and especially we're concerned with school children, with kids. Kids is the most important time. Nutrition is critical for kids. Let's really figure out a way to make sure kids stay healthy during the war effort. And he did it. It was almost miraculous. His efforts helped the nutrition of British school children actually improve during the war because of his focus on healthy eating. We need to understand what vitamins do and how to get them and minerals and things like that. He was called a, quote, genuine home front hero, end quote, and he was knighted for his services during the war.
Wow.
So it was an amazing effort, and he was the instrumental person for just making, as I think about that, the kids, even, eating unhealthy meals, he really focused on, okay, we don't have a lot, we got to give these kids the healthiest meal they can with what little we have. And this history of kind of public spiritedness made his choice of a job a little bit surprising after the war to some of his colleagues when he took that job with Boots.
Yeah.
Again, Boots was, and his research focus was now on things like agrochemicals, not the kind of, public health things that I guess some of those colleagues thought he might pursue. So that was a little weird, but this maybe is an explanation we'll get to a little later. So it's Jack Drummond, as I mentioned, his wife, and his 10-year-old daughter, Elizabeth. They left Nottingham on July 25th in 1952. They took their pretty new Hillman estate. It was a spacious two-door sedan. I think they're sometimes called a saloon car at the time. Mm-hmm. And they put their camping equipment in it, and they got onto a ferry to go into France. At the time, by the way, owning a private car wasn't super common in England. And in the places they were going, in rural France, it was very uncommon for these people to have a car. So it would have been kind of a big deal to have this really. I mean, it's not, that might be overstated because, police had cars and people had cars, but it still was not the norm in the places they were going. So they catch the ferry. I guess they land in Dunkirk on July 28th in France, which tells me they took 3 days to drive from Nottingham to wherever they got their ferry on probably the tip of France. England. So I taking a nice leisurely drive. They're going to be gone for a while. They're taking vacation for a while. So on July 28th, they took a ferry to Dunkirk and they drove through south through Reims and Aix-les-Bains. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. It's A-I-X. So your guess is good as mine. And Digne, D-I-G-N-E. They're now in the Provence area of the south of France. And they moved on to Villefranche. It's a suburb of Nice where the Drummonds stayed at the villa of one of Jack's friends. So they weren't just only camping. They were going to actually stay in the house for a while of a family friend.
Okay.
On August 4th, they drove back up to Digne, about 160 or so kilometers away. I think that's 100 plus miles, to catch a bullfight. Just enjoying things, enjoying bullfights, enjoying bulls being murdered by French toreadors.
Okie dokies.
Yeah.
Apparently they did that in France.
Yeah, it was outlawed there. But it still goes on in Spain. But this is the south of France, so maybe a little more Spanish, culture there. So apparently they're maybe in the mood for some evening sightseeing because the family took a kind of a scenic route through the Durance Valley, not quite to go back to Villefranche after the bullfight, not very direct at all, actually kind of out of the way. And they left around 7 p.m. or so to take this very kind of long route back to Villefranche. So remember, they had their camping trip, not a big deal. They had their camping gear with them, so not that big a deal. And they had dinner at the Grand Hotel in Digne at the evening, right after the bullfight, apparently. And Jack had been talking to the proprietor there, and he had said, God, this is a really nice warm night. Be fine for camping somewhere. Maybe we can sleep along the stars. We got if they went more direct, I think it'd be something like a 3-hour or so drive back to Villefranche. So they maybe would think about going this scenic route along the river valley of the Durance and, stop somewhere and camp. No big deal.
Yeah.
About 40 kilometers or so from Digne, which is not very far. So they didn't get very far. They pulled off the N96 outside of the village of Lures. This is a little village in the south of France. The N96 is a 2-lane rural highway. I'll show you some pictures of it. We'll have some pictures and we'll post some pictures of the scene there, showing the car, showing the road. And it's not, it looks like it's a wooded area for the most part. And it's not a fairly narrow road. So kind of think of like a rural byway kind of a thing. But it did have a decent amount of traffic. It was a main way that people would be driving. You know what I mean? So it's kind of a little, does it make sense? It's a little bit of both. So they are on the N96, they pull over. Jack Drummond is driving, presumably, and it's a right-hand steering wheel British car. He pulls over on the opposite side. So they're driving on the right side in France, though. And he pulls over to the left and pulls over into a turnout or lay-by on the left side of the road. Presumably this was done so everyone can get out on the left side of the car opposite any traffic on the road, because the car was not, I don't know. I'm looking at pictures, and if I had to guess, I would say there's maybe, 25-ish feet or so from the edge of the road to the edge of the turnout, which then goes fairly steeply to a wooded embankment that heads down into toward the Durance River. Okay. The car seemed to be more or less in the middle of that, maybe even a little further over to the embankment. So it's maybe, I'm totally guessing here because I'm literally just looking at pictures and judging by people size and car size, that it may have been 15 feet or so off the road. And the car is 5 or 6 feet wide, and there's a few feet to the left of the car. So think of that. So that's why I said earlier, they're going to camp here, presumably. Yeah. It's literally just what we'd call a turnout along a rural highway. That's not, you or I would never in a billion years camp there. No one I know in the world would camp there. You go camping grounds. This is not, like I said, nothing I've read makes this seem unusual at all that they would camp there. This is like, okay, time to go to bed. We'll get it started fresh and go back to Villefranche in the morning. Yeah. That was apparently the plan. It may also have been a convenience stop, because we'll find out later that some people had seen what almost was certainly Jack Drummond with the hood up of the car. Oh. And we'll see that Anne and her daughter Elizabeth had gone down to a nearby farmhouse to ask for water. So it could have been that the car was overheating. Yeah. It was back in the days of radiators, and you had to put water in the car and you let it sit for a while. So maybe they thought, okay, it's overheated a little bit. Maybe it's a very warm night. It's a very hot summer in Provence that year. It's a warm night, as he had commented to the proprietor at the Grand Hotel in Digne. And so maybe it's just like, okay, let's stop. Let's let the car overheat. Let me take a look at it. Yeah, it's pretty overheated. Can you go get some water? And let's just camp here. Let's just sleep here. So that's probably what happened. That's, though, the last that we know with any certainty about what happened to the Drummond family. It's about 6 o'clock the next morning. It's August 5th, now 1952. A factory worker was returning home on his bicycle from the night shift, and he was just sort of frantically flagged down by a young man at the side of the road along the N96 near the banks of the Durance River. Mm-hmm. The man, comes up to him and is like gasping out his story. I found bodies. I found people. They're up here on the roadside. They're dead. There's 3 of them. All of them are dead. And so the bicyclist, it's not clear who called the police, but they called the gendarmes, and presumably the bicyclist continued into Lures, the nearby village, and alerted the police. The police are out there very quickly. They're on the scene. The first body they see is Anne's. She was lying in kind of low, think like grassy scrub, like longish, weedy grass, just right in front of the Hillman sedan. Just again, looking by the pictures where there's a picture that shows sort of a legend that says, femme, meaning woman, and it shows arrows of where the bodies were found. And she appears to be just several feet in front of the car, at the front end of the car, which again is facing, the opposite side of the road. Right. Jack Drummond's body was found, though, on the opposite side of the N96, and a few feet back, as if he had crossed the road. Yeah. And again, super guessing, maybe had stumbled crossed the whatever distance across the road, not that much. And then maybe 15, 20 feet further, and he had collapsed and died there. Little Elizabeth's body was not readily viewable, but you'll see the family nearby had found it already. So the police were shown where it was, and it was apparently along a trail. So the lay-by, again, it ends on the left side of the lay-by if you're heading, with the flow of traffic, and there's a trail that heads down the embankment apparently toward the river, and there's also going to be a bridge across the river that is perpendicular to the lay-by, so it shoots off of it. Mm-hmm. She had apparently gone down that trail, and it was kind of this brush there, and she was found along the side of the trail, and she was dead as well. Jack and Anne had both been shot 3 times, and he was apparently shot, though, at the front of the car, which would have been where near Anne was as well, because they found, it's a little graphic, they found a portion of his hand, and it had been blown off by a bullet, and it was resting on the top of the bumper of the Hillman. So it's clear he must have been shot right there in front of the car. He then must have, again, stumbled across the street and a little bit rode a little bit further on before he had collapsed. Anne was apparently killed right there. They were both shot in the back, by the way. And she, again, was just maybe, 5 to 10 feet in front of the car. Her body had been covered by a blanket. It's never clear. I read that. I'm not completely clear that it was by the perpetrators or someone who happened onto the scene. I'm not sure. It seems the implication is, from how I interpret what I've read, but a lot of sources, is that it was done by the perpetrators. Again, both had been shot in the back, probably fleeing their attackers, or just in the midst of it, just turning to start to flee when they had been shot. Elizabeth, however, was dressed in pajamas. And again, it's never said clear, but it's, I don't know if they're all in sort of sleepwear or what. Yeah. So it's not clear yet. We'll find out later when they probably were killed, but it's not clear yet whether it happened before they had gone to bed or as they were. Yeah. Elizabeth, for sure, though, because it stated in all the sources that she was in pajamas, and the parents could have been sleeping in their clothes anyway.
I was going to say, if I'm sleeping on the side of the road, I'm staying in my clothes.
For sure. But the girl, the 10-year-old girl, was in pajamas. She had not been shot. She had been clubbed to death. Ugh. The lethal blow was almost certainly by a rifle butt. Yeah. We'll see why it was for sure by a rifle butt later. And it was the lethal blow had kind of caved in her skull. So it's very hard. A lot of power behind it. The killer or killers had then rummaged through the car. It wasn't obvious that they had taken that much stuff at the time. The police could never know. Yeah. But it didn't appear that a lot of stuff had been taken.
I mean, there's no way there's enough of value in that car.
Someone had rummaged through the car, though, which is evidence. Here, I'll show Carrie now a picture. Again, we'll put these pictures. There's the scene. You can see where it points to where the bodies were. If you see, and listeners, when you look at the picture here, it'll have French words for man and wife. And it points to, I believe, what is for the girl, for Elizabeth, it says
fillet.
And it points just sort of down the embankment. It's not a clear indication of how far down the embankment was. Later on, we'll find out she was about 80 meters, which is quite a long ways down the embankment. She got a fair ways away before she was chased down and murdered and clubbed to death. So the murder weapon was an American-made M1 carbine rifle. It's a 30 caliber rifle. You've heard of the M1. It was the workhorse of the U.S. Army during World War II. Millions of them were made. So there's plenty of surplus M1s throughout France after the war, especially in places like rural France and places like this where there was a large resistance activity during the war. The Americans would arm them or just, we lost some weapons, things like that all the time. The rifle was a Rockola M1, as a matter of fact. It's made by Rockola. And the rifle stock had been found floating in the river in pieces, and almost certainly, again, had been broken in the attack on Elizabeth when they were beating her with it, the killer or killers. The barrel itself was found in the bottom of the river. So that has metal, that's sunk. Apparently the wooden stock was floating. And so they found first the stock, and then later they started dredging the river, and they found the rifle very quickly. I think the next day they found the rifle at the bottom of the river. Clearly the killer had thrown the gun into the river, the nearby river. If you're wondering, by the way, just as an aside, Why a gun company would call themselves Rockola?
Yeah.
They wouldn't, because they weren't. This Rockola was the company that made jukeboxes.
Oh.
You heard of Rockola jukebox, the most famous jukebox at least in America. They switched to making M1s during the war. They made over almost 230,000 of them from 1942 to 1944 for the war. But yeah, no, everybody did something for the war. You've got a factory, you're making jukeboxes, and they made some other things as well.
Yeah.
Now, you're making weapons now, and they did. So it appeared obvious that, okay, they had shot the husband probably first. He had been able to get up and stumble away a little ways while they then turned and shot Anne very close to the car. She had also turned, but Ted just turned and maybe got 2 or 3 steps when she was shot and killed. Elizabeth, though, again, was 80 meters away. So she must have, while they were killing her parents, this little girl fled and got as far as she could before they chased her down and caught up with her. She didn't get it all the way to the bridge of the river. Undoubtedly, who knows if she had found the trail before and she knew about it, but it was just she must have been on that side of her parents when this happened. So the investigation, the French police, they fan out. They're trying to find any witnesses, anybody at all who's seen this family. Again, they appear to have been there the night before and not super late either. Remember, they left about 7 p.m. from Digne, and it's only about 40 kilometers away. They probably would have been there. I'm totally guessing here, 7:30ish, not super late.
Yeah.
And it's summer, so it probably still would have been some daylight at the time. I'm sure there would have been. So they were wondering, why had the family stopped? Did this turn out so early in the evening? I know. They didn't know. At first, they don't know. They're not sure what's going on. They found the camping equipment, and then they see Elizabeth in her pajamas and think, okay, they must have been doing some kind of a camping. They must have been stopped. They would later find out. They wouldn't talk to witnesses who said, oh, we drove by. We saw a man looking in the hood. And then they'd find out even later that Anne had gone to a nearby farmhouse to ask for water. Right. So they put it together, and they figured out what had undoubtedly happened. But it was still, it took them a little while. They quickly were able to put together that part of it. So the farmhouse where Anne had gone the night before was called La Grande Terre, the Great Land, I believe, and was only about 200 meters or so away on the river side, the side with the Durance River, so opposite the road again, where the Drummonds had parked their car. It was a hay and olive farm. It was owned and operated by the Domenici family. They were a French family of Italian descent originally, as you might tell. And the patriarch was a man named Gaston Domenici, who was either 75 or 77. Who knows, maybe even 76, as variously reported. So he lived in the farmhouse with wife Maria. And honestly, some number of sons, possibly also some nephews. The reporting is not really good.
Yeah.
At just factually saying, here's who lived there, here's their names. It's terrible. You have to kind of pick through it. And I still don't. Honestly, some said his many sons. Okay, not helpful. We know Gustav was a son. And Gustav is also, he's said to be a boy. He's just literally described as a boy. He has a wife and a baby child. A wife named Yvette and a baby child named Elaine.
And if the parents are in their 70s,
chances could not have been young. I don't know how old the mom was. Maybe she was younger. She could have born a child when she was, I don't know, I'm 45 or something like that. Yeah. He still had to be in his 20s.
Yeah.
So a boy. Okay, stop it. So there's some pretty confusing reports in this. And again, there was one of his brothers named Clovis. He lived there. They also had a cousin and there may have been some cousins living there as well, or some nephews. It's not clear. The youngest son, though, was Gustav. And Gustav was the one who had flagged down the cyclist coming back from his factory job. So that was Gustav. Gustav was the person who would later turn out had found the bodies.
Okay.
The Domenicis were it was a comfortable farm. They were fairly well-to-do. They would initially tell the police that we had no contact with them. We didn't talk to these people. They're up there. We didn't know anything about them until Gustav found their bodies at like 5:30 or so that morning. When he'd gone to it. There was an irrigation pump very near where they had stopped the car, and it needed sort of constant attention because it would flood. It would kind of back up and flood, and if it flooded bad enough, it could actually hinder the rail line, the nearby rail line. I think there's a railway bridge, and it's not clear if it's a walking bridge or a rail bridge over the river. It could actually, so there was a rail line really close along the river, and so there was some worry about that. So they constantly kind of tended to it, and he was out there tending to it. At 5:30 when he found first Elizabeth's body initially.
Okay.
They would later say that at least Gustav and Clovis, again, two of the sons, would say that, you know what, it turns out we did hear some gunshots like 1 a.m., 1:30, something like that, early morning, but we didn't think much of it because night poaching was not super uncommon in the area. You did it at night to not get caught.
Yeah.
Gunshots in this kind of area is not that unusual. We didn't think much about it, so we just did whatever we were doing. I don't know if it's not clear yet if they were asleep or not. It'll turn out later that the family's having a party, so they probably were not. Even later came out that one family member had admitted that, I think it was Clovis, admitted that Anne indeed had been to the farm. I mentioned before, so their initial story is like, we didn't know anything about it. And then later somebody says, no, Anne with her, and the woman, the English woman,
right,
with her daughter, had come to the farm door with a bucket and asked for water. So then, again, initially, it's kind of, you can see the story's coming out in dribs and drabs.
Yeah.
And these are the obvious people because they're the closest farmhouse, but clearly this witness search or the police asking questions for witnesses quickly became focused on, these people might also be suspects for sure.
I mean, if sounds like there's a lot of people living at the farm. If Anne and Elizabeth show up with a bucket, they talk to one person, maybe two of them, and then whoever the police are questioning in the moment, those people that gave them the water weren't there.
Yeah.
I could see that.
Totally fair.
That doesn't necessarily mean
absolutely fair. But I'm so glad you said that because it gives me a chance to go. But Gaston, the patriarch, he was speaking to one of the police officers, and he said something very strange. He told the police officers that Anne Drummond had, quote, died instantly, unquote. The police officer immediately said, how can you know that? You didn't even find the bodies, let alone how do you know she died instantly. Your son found the bodies. As far as we know, as far as you haven't even seen the bodies yet. So he went to his superior and said, this guy Gaston just says something nuts. He's acting a little shady. And so we should maybe focus on him a little bit. So again, Gustave told the police, he said, I found the bodies at 5:30 when I was heading down to irrigation pump. So the police start thinking, okay, well, a half hour? It's 6 o'clock. Why don't you go into Lourdes? Lourdes, the village, wasn't that far away. They had, I'm sure they must have at least had bicycles or something like that. But they wait a half hour before that factory worker comes by in his bike and they flag him down. And I believe, again, I'm not positive. It seems like the implication from what I read is that cyclist had gone into the village and alerted the police. Why didn't the Domenici family get the police? So it gets worse too. A neighbor of the Domenicis, his name is Paul Mallet. We will hear about him a little more later. He told the police that Gustave, the son who had flagged down, had told him Elizabeth was still alive when he had found her body along the trail leading toward the river. It was then one of Gaston's nephews, who apparently also lived in the farmhouse, or at least was over there and spending the night, who told the police about Anne, with Elizabeth in tow, coming to get the water. So these stories are coming out sequentially almost, and they seem worse every time, especially this thing saying, okay, not only was it a half hour before you found a body and flagged down a passerby, but she was alive, and you didn't immediately seek not just police medical attention for her. No, she was left. Didn't even do anything. Didn't bring her back to the house or anything like that. They left her on the side of that trail there where she died. The police are getting more and more interested. Their interest is very much piqued.
Wait, so do they believe that Elizabeth really was alive?
They don't know. Okay. They don't know, but
did it seem like
he admitted that?
So when the police got there, 6:30ish, let's say.
Yeah, she's dead.
She's dead, but did it seem like she had been alive more recently?
No idea.
Deceased than the parents? Because this makes it sound like the parents have been dead for a few hours.
We don't know. Yeah, we don't know.
Okay.
We don't know when the parents died. We don't know when all this stuff happened. Okay. It could have happened all at once. If that's so, it happened not long before Gustave went down there to check out the irrigation pump. Or she, yeah, right. Or she could have held on for hours after her parents were dead. We just don't know yet. So the police are interested. They start really questioning them as suspects more so than witnesses. And they find out again later. They find out from Gustav. He says, "Oh, actually, no, I did see them another time. I went out the night before with my goats, and I saw them down the road, attending to the car and putting, and just I saw the family then. So yeah, I did see them. When we said we never saw them before, we did see them at least twice now. So they start grilling them. Gustav, he breaks down first, followed quickly by his brother Clovis. Those two brothers both admitted that the night before, their father Gaston had gone out, and we'll hear later that they actually heard gunshots and screams, apparently. And he returned to the farmhouse that same night, and he said simply, quote, "I have killed the English," end quote.
Okay.
Yeah. The brother Clovis said, in fact, that they had heard screams, and that the two brothers, Gustav and Clovis, had gone out to the scene after their father came home and said, "I've killed the English."
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted to check, and they wanted to check the casings of a rifle because they heard rifle shots.
Yeah.
And indeed, they found the casings of the rifle that they said they knew was in the possession of their father.
Okay.
So they knew that their father had killed the family the night it occurred. Apparently, right after it occurred.
Yeah.
So it was time for the police to bring Gaston in and grill him. And they did. And they almost immediately got a full confession from this patriarch of this farm family, Gaston Domenici. The details of his story, however, were, let's say, surprising, ? Because Gaston claimed that he had gone to where the Drummonds had stopped by the lay-by. And I guess he had sort of skulked into the bushes, and he said, "I was spying on them from the bushes nearby."
Mm-hmm.
Seeing what they're up to, who knows? I'm not sure. We'll see in a minute what he thinks he was doing. He very immediately realized that Anne Drummond, she was pretty attractive. He found her quite appealing. He was attracted to her. So apparently Jack Drummond, tired easily, he said that Jack went to bed and was asleep in a camp bed, I guess.
Yeah.
And so he said, okay, he skulks on down there when Anne began to undress herself for bed.
Uh-huh.
And he saw his chance, came over there and propositioned her. And Anne Drummond, absolutely up for it.
Sure.
She is very attracted to this 75 or 77-year-old farm patriarch, Gaston Domenici. I mean, Carrie, he's French and Italian. She had no choice. She had no chance against that kind of charm. Right? No. So this is a story, Carrie.
Mm-hmm.
So unfortunately, though, their vigorous lovemaking awakens the nearby sleeping Jack Drummond. He rises, sees the indiscretion in front of him, and he just sort of, according to Gaston, he just charged straight at Gaston. Gaston apparently had brought the rifle with him.
Of course.
As you do when you're going to be a voyeur. And he just instinctively shot Jack Drummond. Remember,
in
3
the
times
back.
in the back on the way charging him. He then said that both the girl and the mom started screaming, so he had to shoot her to shut her up.
In the back.
And he just said something like, the daughter ran away, but I caught her and dispatched her, or something like that.
Yeah.
So, and because they were screaming and hysterical, and they just saw what he had done to their father. These police aren't stupid. They know this story is utterly ludicrous.
Right.
I mean, but they had a confession of murder, regardless of the details surrounding it. They had a confession of murder.
Yeah.
So there's a lot they had to ignore, though. His description of the wounds did not fit. He didn't say I shot him in the back.
Right.
So those don't fit. That's one thing going against him. There's some others we'll find out in a little bit. But the biggest one, of course, he's 75 or 77. Yes. He walks with a cane. He's very uneasy on his legs. He's this rural rustic farmer who used a rope for a belt, filling all of the stereotypes of a rural rustic farmer. He was a leathery, old, wrinkled man. The New York Times, in a contemporaneous article, described him as, quote, gnarled. And I've seen the pictures. He is gnarled.
And 75-year-old man who's lived through War
out in the
One
sun,
and World War II,
and just an out in the sun farmer. No.
Yeah.
He was not the sophisticated Anne Drummond's type by any stretch of the imagination.
We know that's not true. Even if he did kill them, he's just making up circumstances.
It's weird.
But, yeah. But that's what I was going to say. If Jack Drummond woke up, Jack Drummond wasn't particularly young.
He was 61.
Either,
He was kind of a skinny, tall, but a very gentlemanly kind of guy. He's a professor at the University of London.
I was going to say he probably hadn't lived so hard of a life.
No, he had not. Gaston would, though, however, recant his confession just a few days later. But he took it all back.
I'm assuming he was covering up for one of his kids.
Well, we'll just see about that now, won't we? He said, wait, I was drunk when I made that confession. And I was just kind of boasting. More to the point, he said, I made the confession just to protect my family, my family's honor. So the police naturally wonder from what? What are you protecting from? He's not the stories are not great. He said that his youngest son, Gustav, he told the police that he had seen his youngest son, Gustav, dragging Elizabeth's body into like a hayfield nearby. Whether she was dead or just inert, it's not clear. But, so he kind of throws his son under the bus pretty quickly when he's recanting his own confession to protect them. So weirdly or not, Gustav, he then also recanted his story. And he said, the police bullied him into implicating his father. Now, I don't know whether Gustav knew that his dad had just thrown him under the bus when he made his recantation, but he did. Even stranger, Brother Clovis did not recant his confession and said, no, my dad said, we heard screams, we heard gunshots. My dad came in and said, I killed the English. Yeah. So the stories are all over the board.
Huh.
If they are coming up, they're doing a shitty job of it.
Right.
The confession, the conflicting stories of the Domenici family, though, was enough for the French jury. And in November of 1954, Gaston Domenici was convicted of murder and sentenced to death by guillotine.
Oof.
There was immediately widespread dissatisfaction with the case. And whether from national pride or maybe rivalry with England's like, they killed English people, two consecutive French presidents just were not convinced. This was a cause célèbre in France especially, but it was also in England. And the New York Times covered it at the time. Everybody did. It was a huge, huge story. So in 1957, the French president at the time, René Coty, he commuted Gaston's sentence, which saved his neck from the blade, but he's still this old man in prison. So in 1960, the next president, Charles De Gualle, let him free. Okay. I don't want to be able to fall apart him, but let him free. And Gaston was out of prison after just about less than 6 years for what we assume, if he was guilty, a triple murder.
Yeah.
Again, he had been throughout this time, he had been denying it since a few days after his initial confession.
I'm surprised he lived that long.
Yeah. Yeah, he was an old man. But he was healthy, and pretty sexy too. So Coty and De Gualle weren't and are not now even the only people who believe there was a lot more to this story than this, crusty old farmer murdered an English family that had stopped at the roadside near his house. Regardless, whatever the motivation was, still, I'm sure a lot of people did think, okay, Gaston was involved, but a lot of people said, no, there's something deeper here. And researchers since then have really pursued a few avenues along the line of, okay, what really happened to the Drummond family in 1952? Most of the doubts and suspicions, of course, they focus on the prominence of Jack Drummond. They think there was something very mysterious and deep happening in Lourdes back in all those years ago. And there were tons of questions. Why had the Domenicis killed the Drummonds if that was true, assuming the recantations were not true? Some number of them had done it. Why? What was the motivation for that? Whose gun was this M1? Because it turns out it wasn't clear that, and Gaston, no one thought Gaston owned a rifle. He may have had a shotgun. We'll see why that's important later. But he didn't own a rifle. As far as anyone knew, he didn't use a rifle. He wasn't part of the resistance during the war at all. So that was weird. Other witnesses, at least 4 independent witnesses, that said, what? We saw some men very nearby on the side of the road on that same night that the Drummond family were murdered. We don't know who they were. They weren't locals. We didn't recognize them, but we did see some men. Who were these mysterious men that were out there along the side of the road? Had they done something? Were they involved? Was someone else involved? And then there was, as we kind of teased a minute ago, Gaston's conviction. It had so many holes. He didn't have the injuries right for the bodies. The wounds were not quite right. Also, though, when he reenacted the murder to the police. He's saying, "Here's what I did," right? And when he started sort of doing this reenactment for the police, he mimed the action. And what he mimed was shot, pop it out, reload, shot, pop out, casing, reload, shot, pop out, casing, reload multiple times.
Like a shotgun.
Like a one-shot shotgun, not an automatic rifle like the M1, which would have taken none of that. You eject, you have that what's the word I'm looking for? The thing you pull back on the rifle, you have that. But he was what he was miming was a single shot shotgun,
right?
Not an M1 rifle. It seemed pretty clear that he didn't know how to use an M1 rifle, which they knew was the murder weapon already. They knew it very quickly.
Yeah.
So the police kind of ignored that when they prosecuted him.
Well, they probably figured somebody in that family did it. So.
Yeah. There were some other scripts by police. They had, when they retrieved the rifle butt pieces that floating in the river, they had done so with no gloves, and they never got those pieces fingerprinted. And that's the butt of the gun.
Yeah.
And it was also, by the way, the part of the gun that was used to kill Elizabeth. And the police had never roped off or taped off or otherwise protected the crime scene. And so it was almost immediately, as soon as, probably even before they got there or soon after they got there, locals were stumbling onto the scene. Reporters were there very quickly that very morning.
Well, that picture you showed me, it looked like there were a ton of people there.
And they're not all cops. They're reporters. They're just looky-loos and locals, and they're trampling all over this crime scene. The police never protected that crime scene.
In that picture, I'm assuming the bodies are not there.
The bodies are not there. They've been taken away. Yes. There is one picture of Anne's body. We don't have to.
No, I wouldn't show
online. I'm sure there are lots of, just from what I found in my research, I'm sure there's pictures of all of them somewhere. So the lead investigator also was looked at with some suspicion because he was from Marseille. It's the nearest big city with an actual experienced homicide detective bureau. And he supposedly had a grudge against Domenicis because they worked for, or they supported different parties in France at the time. Okay. I know.
It's weird.
But he had this grudge, allegedly had a grudge against that farm family. And there were hints, though, that he had kind of, goofed it up or biased it in favor of the conviction. I mean, again, they had to ignore this ludicrous confession and use that as the main evidence against them. And he had ignored, the lead detective had ignored some footprints found at the scene that did not match Gaston or anyone else connected with any of the sons, for instance.
Yeah.
So, he said, oh, no, those aren't important. Forget it. And he didn't make them part of the investigation.
Yeah.
The most popular line of inquiry, though, into what really happened, quote unquote, is that Jack Drummond was something more than just a pharmaceutical scientist. There's a researcher named Raymond Bodine, and he is in this camp. He told the Guardian newspaper a few years ago, quote, "I don't think Gaston was the author of the triple murder of Lourdes. I think the family was a pawn, among others, caught up unwittingly on the chessboard of a secret battle fought between East and West over each block's leading scientist. Jack Drummond, we're almost certain, was a spy." A little bit purple prosy there, but that's the main angle. Jack Drummond was in some form or fashion a spy, and that's why he and his family were killed. Then the family presumably being collateral damage.
Sure.
So Bodin himself, his research, he said that this was not Jack Drummond's first time in Lourdes. Remember, there's a little nothing village in the south of France. Jack Drummond had been there in 1947, in 1948, and 1951, and now again the summer of 1952.
Why was he there?
That's a great question.
How do we know he was there?
He was there. Raymond Bodine's research had found evidence that he had been there all those four years. From what I can tell, that's not in question. He had been there. So the question really is more, why was he there?
So they don't. So his research confirms that he was there.
Bodine's confirms that he was there.
But not why he was there.
His theory is that there is a chemical plant, a very prominent one, very near Lourdes, and it's specialized in military-grade chemicals, including, by the way, Agent Orange, which would later be used so horrifically in the Vietnam War by the U.S. The company that ran that plant was Rome Poulenc, was a prime rival of Boots and Jack Drummond's pharmaceutical company that he worked for. And they were both in the agrochemical field, and they were just sort of, I guess, pharmaceutical rivals. including some stuff with military applications.
It's hard to believe that they would kill an entire family.
So it's almost, okay, so was this corporate espionage gone way too far? I mean, that seems to be what Badina is asserting anyway. He cited a senior French police officer who did think this was what happened. Again, this is, now you have to trust Badina at this point.
Yeah.
The two companies involved had, they made like pesticides and fertilizers and things like that, that were military grade. And so they were, they had, Boots had sent Jack Drummond out to spy on their rival, and he'd been caught. And who knows why, but killed.
Mm-hmm.
Other people who agree with the spy angle, though, don't agree with it being a corporate spy thing. They think it's more of a national security spy thing. There's one writer named William Raymond who uses Elaine as his source. Yes, Elaine Domenici, the baby in the farmhouse, the son of Gustave, who was a baby at the time. He's made all kinds of claims about what really happened. Of course, he was a baby
How would he know?
at the time. Presumably family, know, stuff like that in his own researches. And Elaine Domenici claims that he has spoken to a German criminal named William Bartkowski, who said that he had been hired by, quote, 3 foreigners, unquote, to drive them from what was then West Germany into southeastern France on that fateful summer in 1952. Bartkowski allegedly said he thought he was going to be like a getaway driver or like a jewel heist or something like that. He was like a small-time criminal, so not a big deal for him. But that wasn't the case, or at least he realized that wasn't the case when they had him pull over in the dead of night on the side of this rural, the N96 highway in the south of France near Lourdes, and they got out of the car. The 3 men disappear into the darkness, and not long later, he hears gunshots and screams from somewhere out in the night. Mm-hmm. He's like, what the hell's happening going on? The 3 men, suddenly they come hustling back to the car, and they tell the Bartkowski that they had just killed an English scientist. Supposedly, the Bartkowski described the French countryside years later perfectly around that area, around exactly where the family was killed, where the Drums were killed. Also, supposedly, there's documents that England has that support this story, and they allege that those 3 foreigners were KGB agents. The KGB, of course, being the notorious spy agency of the then USSR, now Russia. And that also France had found them, arrested those 3 KGB agents in 1965, but had refused to extradite them to England. As you probably are thinking right now, there's absolutely nothing about the story that makes any sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
I mean, the German guy, Bartkowski, said it was dark when he stopped. So how does he describe the countryside many decades later, presumably with such perfection when he couldn't have seen it? Where are these documents, these English documents? Why wouldn't the French let the English have these 3 Russian agents who murdered their leading scientist and his family? Would Russia kill even a scientist who is doing things that have military grade? They're going to kill that scientist? Yeah, I mean, would they need to? Would they do that? I feel like there'd be a lot of dead Western scientists if that was how we did things. Yeah. So this story is
stupid,
completely nonsense.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean there aren't some pretty serious problems with the quote unquote official story. It's a peeve of mine that we say the words official story like it must be a lie.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is, though.
Yeah.
And one of the indications of that is that the wounds to Jack Drummond and his wife may have been for different guns. There's an indication, or there's reporting that the entry wounds were of different sizes. So I don't know, because when we talk about what likely happened, I don't think that it was from different guns, but there is at least this kernel that, that implies there was more than one person involved, and they both have different weapons. It's possible. The entry wounds.
So hang on.
Go ahead.
So this means there were no actual bullets found in their bodies?
Yeah, there were. Okay. And they all, as far as I can tell, they all came from N1s. Were they from different N1s? I don't know. I mean, a lot of companies made N1s.
No, but if they're the same bullets, then the entry wounds.
Well, 30 caliber bullets
would be the same.
Yeah, you would think so. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So
that doesn't make a lot of sense, does it?
No.
I don't know if I give that a whole lot of validity anyway. But whether that happened or not doesn't matter. There were other problems with the kind of official account, namely those men. Who were those men at the scene those three or so men that were seen by these. I mean, it's not for sure. We don't know. There could be sort of mistaken identity.
I was going to say, we know how eyewitness.
Yeah, exactly. Could have been a different night. Who knows?
Yeah,
It could have been people that were locals, but they just didn't recognize it because it's dark and they drove by them really fast. So who knows? But there were these kind of 4 witnesses said, I saw some people that I didn't recognize out there around the same time. Or it could be, again, eyewitnesses looking for attention. We know that happens all the time. There was a little bit of a hint of espionage, though. Why the hell had Jack Drummond been to Lures 4 times?
Yeah.
In just a few years. That's very strange. There really was this rival chemical plant nearby. Jack also had a camera with him. They know the family had a camera because a lot of people said that we saw them taking pictures. The camera was not found. The camera was taken. Oh. Why would someone rummage through the car and take very little else?
Yeah.
But take the camera? I know you say, cameras are salable, but I'm sure they had other things there that could be sold for a few francs. So, but they took the camera for sure. Interesting. A camera that presumably just had vacation pictures on it, or did it just have?
I'm assuming they didn't leave the camera back at the villa. It was for sure in the car.
No, they never found it.
Okay.
The camera, the Drummond's family camera, was never found.
Okay.
The researcher Badine, he discovered that Drummond had met with a man named Father Lorenzi in the town of Lures just 2 days before the family was murdered. Father Lorenzi was a famous resistance organizer and fighter during the war.
Yeah.
He was also very good friends with Paul Millet, who was also a resistance fighter. That's the neighbor of the Domenicis that I mentioned earlier. That neighbor, Paul Millet, he was the owner, in all likelihood, of that Rockola M1. That was his rifle that was used to kill the Drummonds. So, is there a connection there? Why was Jack Drummond, a pharmaceutical and leading scientist, meeting with some obscure rural priest in south of France? That's very strange. Baudin said, quote, "There's a lot more work to be done. The Domenici's strange behavior indicates they knew a lot more about the crime than they ever let on, but they were not guilty of the murders. I think they plainly got caught up in something far bigger than themselves," end quote. And again, Baudin thinks it's this some kind of a spying thing, a corporate espionage thing. So we don't know. I mean, was it true that Millet owned the rifle? It seems like it probably was. In some way, was he implicated then? This neighbor? Remember, the neighbor actually said something against the family at the time when he was questioned, so that's odd. Gaston Domenici
said something against the Domenici.
Yeah, he was the one who had said, oh God, I have to go back.
Okay.
It was Millet who had said that Gustave had told him Elizabeth was alive when he first found her.
Okay.
So if he's part of it, that seems unusual for him to have said that. But he apparently did own that rifle.
And they know that rifle was the one he owned, not just
it
the
seems
same
like,
kind that he owned?
Yeah, no, it seems like that was his rifle because it was a very distinct. We'll find out in a minute why. It was a pretty distinct rifle.
What was his explanation about how?
He didn't have one. As far as I can tell, he didn't have an explanation. But I think
prosecuted.
I think I know why. But
okay.
Just hold on. So is Paul Millet involved somehow since he owned the rifle? Gaston, he also, his story is ridiculous, but he does seem like there's some level of involvement there as well with him.
Yeah.
So are these two, I presumably, older French guys going to do the bidding of local big pharma? Because they catch this guy, this English scientist, spying on a nearby big chemical plant? That seems weird. So, and unlikely. I mean, even they had caught Drummond spying. Are they really going to take the law into their own hands like that? I mean, one possibility is that Father Lorenzi, who knew both men very well, he figured out what Drummond was doing there. Maybe even Drummond asked him almost like, or sought information of him, and he was pissed. So he said, he didn't help Drummond. In fact, he told them, I don't know, to keep an eye on those guys, and one thing led to another, and they killed the English corporate spy. I don't know. It's hard to say. In my opinion, unlikely.
Yeah.
I know people again say that, no, he was spying for like the MI6. MI6 was known to place people with large, important corporations that had military applications, things like that. Yeah. So that could explain why he went to work for Boots rather than do something in the public health field.
And I was going to say, he had already done work for the government.
Yes, exactly. That was odd. So some people think maybe that indicates he was essentially a placement for MI6 and he was involved in corporate espionage, but espionage that was more national security espionage. And then he was there to do some kind of spying for them. And maybe he even arranged for a meeting at that lay-by, at that turnout. I know.
Weird with your wife and 10-year-old.
I know. So, I mean, that's one thought. The spy angle, though.
If he's a spy for the government, then who's the enemy that's killing him?
Great question. Yeah. The KGB. France certainly.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not France.
It would have to be Russia. And why, did they intercept the intelligence, knew he was going to meet some other spy locally, and so they, interrupted it and killed him? I don't know. You have to, to me, the spy angle is ludicrous. It's not convincing at all. Even if he did not expect violence, and he goes, yeah, I'll just meet somebody. We're passing information. He's still not going to take any chance to do that with his kid, his 10-year-old, and his wife in tow. I just don't. And it's a really weird place to do it. It was a totally nondescript. There's no markings like meet me at the whatever. You would never know. I guess you could have said something like maybe the byway near the Durance River Valley. But
maybe that wasn't the plan, but their car did
break down. Yeah,
genuinely break down,
which implies it wasn't a rendezvous,
and he was being followed. Yeah, and so
But are you? Well, yes, that's true. But you're not going to go through with that meeting, are you? Unless he's being followed by KGB spies.
Yeah, no, I'm saying that wasn't the meeting. That was somebody following him.
Oh, like what's good? Really?
But it's still.
You don't do that. You don't follow the person to
I don't.
Your meeting. You do if that was the meeting place. Because some people also say that's why he parked on that side of the road so he can look and see oncoming traffic. And no,
you can see oncoming traffic from either side of the road.
That's silly. That shows you how people think, though. Yeah. On the internet, they go, I have the explanation for it. No, you don't. That's a dumb idea. So, and also, it's 200 meters away from this apparently very overcrowded farmhouse. You're not going to do that there. You're going to do something either more quiet or more public.
Yeah.
But we still have to explain all those contradictions and confessions of the Domenici family, right? And also the apparent fact that Paul Millet owned that gun that was used to murder the family. So what's going on there? I think there is an explanation for that. So the following argument, I think, goes a long way to explain. I agree with it. I owe a lot of it to essentially, it's on a website called Bullet Path, and I didn't see an author's name. I would say it if I did, but I saw no author name on it. It's just sort of an article on a website called Bullet Path.
I see that a lot.
Yeah, I wish they'd not do that.
Yeah.
I know, just put your name on it. Yeah. I'm sure he's, it's just like, oh, I'm the only person on this website, but I don't know who you are.
Yeah.
On the evening of the murder, according to this argument, and I'm going to fill in some things I think too. It's not completely from there, but on the evening of the murder, Anne and Elizabeth did indeed, as we pretty clear, made themselves known to the Domenici family when they went to get water. So the Domenicis know they're out there on that lay-by, that turnout. The Domenicis were having a party that night. They had a lot of guests over that night. Mostly family and extended family and some friends. But it just seems like there's no doubt they would have had contact with the Drummonds for sure during the night. Gustav said he found Elizabeth's body first when he went to check on the irrigation pump around. He said around 5:30. He then found Anne and Jack in that order. So again, as we established, husband and wife, they both shot 3 times. That's 6 bullets, and I don't know how much what the magazine capacity is of an M1, but they also found 2 live 30 caliber rounds near the bodies, not just the casings of the spent rounds that we used to kill, and there could have been shots that missed entirely. That's something weird, right? Why would there be live rounds in there?
They dropped them.
They dropped them, or possibly that weapon, as I mentioned, was distinct in that M1 that Paul Millet owned. It was held together with the help of wire. It was old. It was in very poor condition.
Yeah.
And that's possible that could explain the live rounds because the rifle could have misfired. And when you have misfire, you kind of have to eject it, and you eject the live rounds, and then after you fire, you eject the casings are ejected as well. So that could explain misfiring of an old, poorly maintained weapon could have been why you found the live rounds. And we know that weapon, that M1 that was used to kill him, that Rockola, was in poor shape. Right. At the very least, though, what this shows is that it for sure was not KGB master criminals who use an old-ass gun from the war and, kind of bumbling their way through, leaving live rounds there, even leaving the casings there is not a smart thing to have done. So this was, at the very least, the scene of the crime indicates this was not any kind of a professional hit whatsoever.
I agree.
Outsiders also you'd never toss the weapon in the river.
Yeah.
You'd bring it out with you and dismantle it and destroy it very thoroughly. This person just panicked and threw it in the river.
Yeah. I wonder why.
This person or persons, because they were probably panicking. But people who live along nearby and want to get rid of the weapon, what choice do they have? What's the best place for them to do it?
the
river.
Yeah.
For sure. So strong indication this was done by locals, not outsiders. And we know there was plenty of these weapons in the hands of these locals from the war and from the resistance activities during the war. All of this says this was an unplanned murder, and it was committed by someone who just, panicked a little bit. They shot 3 people. They shot 2 adults. They bludgeoned a child, and then they tossed the weapon in the nearby river, where it's almost certain to be found, and was found the next day. This is something that was a spur of the moment thing. It's a spontaneous event. Gustav, the youngest son, it seems, it appears apparent he wouldn't have admitted it, and Paul Millet wouldn't have said so either, and he wouldn't have told Paul Millet if it wasn't true. But he almost certainly did find Elizabeth still clinging to life. That to me indicates that she had been bludgeoned not that long before, and he said he had gone out there at 5:30 in the morning.
Yeah,
he would never explain why he didn't seek medical help. So that's just, again, he didn't even have a story for that. He would later, by the way, serve 2 months for kind of like a charge of failing to assist.
Oh.
And would be let out of prison in 1952. In late 1952, he got out of prison after serving 2 months. A cellmate of his would later tell police that he heard Gustav talking to his wife Yvette and discussing the murder in a way that he felt implicated Gustav. And they knew, but of course, that's a prison snitch.
Yeah.
So their word is pretty useless. I don't know what to make of that, or if we should. I think, I don't know. Gaston would later say, the patriarch Gaston would later say that he was protecting his family when he confessed to the murders. I think he was.
Yeah. He might have thought one of his sons did it.
But it was a very poorly incoherent confession that the different parts of the family, apparently they didn't get their stories straight, so to speak. The details indicate that Gaston was not there, right? He can't have been. He has this faulty version of events. He don't know how the injuries were. He's 75 years old, or 77. He walked with a cane. And he also, by the way, had these distinctive hobnail boots. That the shoe print was very distinctive. No one did hobnails in their boots anymore in 1952. There were no hobnail boot prints found anywhere near the murders. So it doesn't mean he wasn't involved, but he wasn't down there and he didn't, do it. The Bullet Path author, he said that his guess is that it was Gustav and possibly his brother Clovis, and both of whom, by the way, remember, had implicated their dad.
Right.
Whether that was to further the lie or they freaked out, I don't know. It's not clear. He also thinks that their cousin Roger Perrin was involved. And Roger Perrin had these crepe-soled shoes, and they found crepe-soled shoe footprints next to Elizabeth's body where she was found.
Yeah.
But nothing was made of it. I don't know for a fact that's the footprints that the lead detective from Marseille covered up, but they may have been. But who knows? It could have been a reporter or a local that made those two. It's not clear. But a French police commissioner would write in his memoir, published in 1976, his own guess of what happened that night, and it's pretty convincing. It was something like this. Here's what happened part. The Gustav and Roger Perrin, his cousin, are out in the early morning to tend to the pump and to maybe shoot rabbits. Hence, they were in possession of their neighbor's old rifle. So my guess is that Paul Millet let the family borrow it, or even let the two borrow it, because they occasionally, like I said, go shoot varmints, right?
Yeah.
And so, and it's probably earlier than the 5:30 that Gustav would later say, is my strong suspicion. If you're going to cover up and going to lie about a murder, why say the actual time that you did it? It's probably much earlier in the morning. It was probably probably 1 and 1:30, because apparently people did hear some gunshots.
Right.
And it's not clear if the party was still going on or not that night, if the party had ceased by then or not. But if it was earlier, which I think it was, they were probably drunk. And so they stumble onto the campsite or it could have been 5:30 in the morning too. So it's not clear. So say it is 5:30 in the morning, right?
It could be dark. Would it be dark?
No, in summer, I don't know.
Yeah.
It'd be probably dawn. So they go out. They're hungover, maybe even still a little drunk from a crazy night.
Yeah.
And they have the gun to shoot some rabbits, but they first have to go check the irrigation pump, the troublesome irrigation pump that could flood. That's right next to the impromptu campground of the Drummonds.
Yeah.
So they go there and they're making noises, whatever. They wake up Jack Drummond, and he's like, well, what the hell's going on over here? whatever, words are exchanged.
Yeah.
And they have some kind of a confrontation, right? And maybe whoever has one of the two has the weapon in their hand. And maybe Jack Drummond's like, I don't like you the way you're brandishing that weapon. Maybe he lunges for it. Maybe he tries to disarm them because these two drunken, half-drunk, hungover kids. He's like the grown-up in the room. He goes for the gun and just, boom, it just happens. Whoever had the gun just reared back and shot. I'm not from the wounds. I'm not clear if any were front or all were back, or maybe he goes
that's
for the gun.
the one in his hand.
Maybe you're right. Maybe that's right. He shot off his hand, and then he turns and he shoots him. Just instinctively shoots him. I just shot a guy. He shoots him 2 more times, and starts screaming. She's just a few feet away. She turns to run when he whirls and shoots her 3 times in the back.
Yeah.
Elizabeth screams and runs down the trail toward the river. Either whether one of them then, tossed the gun and said, go after her, or just that person who just done the shooting went after her.
Yeah.
They are now out of bullets, out of live rounds. And so when they do finally chase her down 80 meters away down the trail, they're forced to beat her to death and club her with the butt of the gun. Well, you know what I mean? They have little choice if they can't shoot her anymore, and that's why she is beaten and not shot. The crepe sole footprints, if they really were Roger Perrin's, that indicates that he may have been. But again, it could have been Gustave who shot the first 2, and Roger who killed her, or it could have been Roger who killed them all. We just don't know. It could have been all. Gustave could have done all of them. And Roger just went with him down to where his shoe prints were found. So it's not clear. Clovis, the older brother, either he was with them or more likely he helped in the cover up, as of course, and then they go tell their dad what happened, and he's he's angry. They first try to cover it up, but just the Gustave panics and starts talking about some things. Clovis does the same.
Yeah.
They implicate their dad. Maybe they thought their dad had already said something, he'd take the fall, but they don't know what he's saying, and he doesn't know what they're saying, and their stories just contradict one another. Who knows exactly how much cooperation there was in those stories, but it was just it was a complete screw up and totally contradictory. They also rifled the car to make it look like a robbery, a half-assed, lame attempt. They took the camera only because it was something right there in all likelihood. They probably threw that in the river too, or just or hid that, or who knows where that was, and just wasn't found, is all. And then Gaston, then the clumsy attempted cover-up follows. It falls apart. Maybe Gaston also thought, let me take this. I'm 75 or 77. Right. They won't convict me, or who cares if I spend a few years in prison. I'm old. I'm going to die soon anyway. Turns out he actually didn't die until 1965, the age of 88. But another 5 years after he's out of prison.
Yeah.
That to me is the most likely course of events. There's some kind of confrontation with some set of the Domenici boys.
Yeah.
They shoot him in this accidental confrontation. They panic and shoot Anne when she's screaming. At this point, you've killed 2 adult English tourists. You do the even more horrific thing of clubbed to death the 10-year-old girl.
Yeah.
Just it all could have happened in 15 seconds for the shooting, and 30 seconds later to when you kill her. You're still in that rush of insanity and spontaneous, unthinking, horrific, murderous rage of some sort. That's the story of the Domenici affair of 1952. Again, it's a pretty big story at the time. There actually is a plaque there now at the site of where this occurred, near the railroad bridge next to the nearby where this occurred, and it specifically mentions the memory of 10-year-old Elizabeth Drummond. The family was married. They were buried in Fauquier. I don't know where that is. Somewhere nearby. This story,
their bodies weren't taken back to England? That's weird.
It just says that the family are buried in nearby Fauquier. Huh. So, they didn't bring them back. That is a little unusual, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so as well. This story, if you know the case or not, it has very eerie parallels with the Annecy murders of 2011 that took place in the French town of Annecy, about 280 kilometers, 175 miles or so to the north, near the Swiss border of Geneva, which we will bring to you next time, or at least very soon, because that happened in 2011. That was a huge story. I remember it. I don't know if you do or not.
No.
The Annecy murders, it happened to another British family slaughtered in France under even more, if anything, even more unexplained and mysterious circumstances. And that case also had these spy or national security overtones that really may have been true in that case, potentially. So we'll maybe treat that next time, or at least soon. Okay. But we hope you enjoyed the Domenici affair. Again, I hate to say the word enjoyed. I shouldn't say that, but found it interesting. It's a, like I said, we don't know. That's the best guess of what happened. Who knows? Something like that probably happened, but
something like that seems how, more likely than some of the other theories. But
I think we can discard the spy,
just horrible
stuff in this case. It was much more a retail murder. It wasn't any big picture things going on here. It was just an awful little thing that happened in a little town in France in 1952. Yeah. So, Carrie, until next time.
Thanks for listening.
Okay.
Bye.